Welcome to Deviatus. As you know, this is October, and I'm coming at you with a very special extra episode this month. Normally I publish every 2 weeks, but this time I am actually coming at you with a weekly episode throughout the month of October. And today I've got a very special guest who is also new to the podcasting world. He's currently got 4 episodes out there, and I believe there may be a 5th by the time you're hearing this. Of course, I'm talking about Jesse Haynes, who runs the Cryptid Creatures Podcast that I recently stumbled upon. And if you're a fan of shows like Lore, along with paranormal stuff like you hear on Deviatus, I think you'll like his show. We took some time to discuss some of the creatures that he has already delved into, as well as some that he has coming up on the show. But before we talk to Jesse, I wanted to send out a reminder. If you didn't catch last week's episode with Ted Berner, he talks about giants and Nephilim. And in honor of Halloween, I am doing a very special giveaway. Ted has agreed to let me give away an autographed copy of his book, Proof the Novel, which is a fictional story about giants and Nephilim and megalithic structures. But the story is based out of a lot of factual components and research that he did about all these things. Anyway, it was an excellent book. In order to enter the giveaway for a chance to win an autographed copy, you can go to deviatus.com/burner. That's BERNER. And there you'll find 7 ways to enter. All of them involve social media of some kind and sharing the link that I've posted there. So if you haven't already, please go check that out. The giveaway deadline is Halloween at midnight. Ooh, scary. I just want to say a quick thanks to Ted Berner for the amazing giveaway prize. I'm going to keep reminding you about it so that you can continue to enter and enjoy that great book. But now I'd like to go ahead and dive in our discussion with Jesse Haynes. And again, he is the producer of Cryptid Creatures. Well, congrats on the show. I mean, I don't know how many episodes you launched with, but I've listened to the 4 episodes you've got out. It sounds great.
Well, thank you. Appreciate that. I definitely am surprised as to how well it has been received. Like, I thought it was an interesting subject matter, but I didn't know that many people would care too much about cryptozoology.
Yeah, it's funny because I like pretty much anything paranormal, and you kind of see people divided within that realm. I didn't niche down quite as tight, but that's one of the things I find it difficult to find subjects for or people willing to talk to me about is the cryptids.
Well, perfect. So then I might, and I'm by no means an expert. I'm just, like I said, I'm just a college kid researching them as I go, but I'm definitely having fun with it and learning some stuff. So,
well, what made you get into it?
Podcasting in general, or
just your interest in cryptids, I guess.
My interest in cryptids probably came from just watching Sci-Fi Channel as a younger kid, and the show Destination Truth, Josh Gates and company, that was one of my biggest inspirations. And ideally, if I could do a dream job, I would love to travel around the world and look for stuff. And even if I never found anything, it would still be great, because I love the folklore and I love the myth of all those different cryptozoologic animals. And yeah. I think just that driving interest is kind of what drew me into Cryptid Creatures, and I wanted to, with Cryptid Creatures, provide some sort of the same journey that you can be taken on with these TV shows, but just audio. So stories for the journey that you can just listen to on the go.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that show, because that's probably the show that really got me into, I don't know, researching this stuff, that and the early editions of Ghost Hunters and maybe Ghost Hunters International and stuff. Yeah.
That's awesome. I'm a big Josh Gates fan.
Yeah, me too. I actually I got to meet him at one of those Travel Channel exposés they do down at the San Diego Convention Center.
Crazy.
Yeah, super nice guy. I've emailed him a couple times trying to get him on this podcast of mine, but I think I need to build some notoriety first before that's ever going to happen.
Well, it's funny you mentioned that, because I emailed him a couple of days ago, and obviously no response. I'd be pretty stoked if he did respond, but
Yeah,
he's so dadgum charismatic and stuff. He's a lot of fun to listen to, a lot of fun to watch.
yeah, we kind of we joke around in my family because we watch this Expedition Unknown right now, and I just tried to watch the Yeti episode that aired last night. It was amazing. But we do joke around though that like he should teach history. Like, I mean, how many times did I fall asleep in history class in school?
Yeah, for real. But with Josh, it's interesting.
Yeah.
I'm making my way through season 2 of Expedition Unknown.
Okay.
I have Yeti DVR.
Yeah.
Oh, definitely. I don't mind getting into that at all, and I have some fairly interesting stories.
So you watched that show, but then at what point did you say like I want to start a podcast on this?
Go with those are, but I definitely have some background on a couple of those things.
Mm-hmm.
And that's very good to hear. I'm glad you liked it, and I'm glad that it reminded you of something, because for me the Ozark Howler, which is sad because I live in terms of the episodes I've published so far, this one was definitely the closest to home. But I never heard of the Ozark Howler. I'd heard of the rest of them, but the Ozark Howler was not a super popular one, but it was definitely a local one to an extent, being from Oklahoma. They said that there had been some sightings in Oklahoma, found some stories of that online. So I wanted to start with something kind of closer to home, so my friends and some of the people I thought would be hopefully downloading the first podcast at least would find it of some interest because of that local home area appeal it had. So that one was a lot of fun to write and research. Yes, sir. Oh, Pope Lick. Oh, man.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I wondered the same thing, too. That was... I don't know if I can say that was the most far-fetched one I've wrote about or researched yet, but, man, that's definitely a contender. 7-foot-tall goat, bipedal goat. Yeah, that's way up there.
Imagine like running into something like that at all.
Oh my goodness, yes. I would never leave my house ever again if I ran into a 7-foot-tall goat man. I would be like, well, I'm done. Nice knowing y'all.
And then the third one was the bloop sound. And I for some reason, I was really fascinated by this. I found this probably the most intriguing. I actually rewound it and listened to parts of it a couple times. Was this disproved 100%?
Well, the NOAA definitely they tried to debunk it, but they didn't do themselves any favor when attempting to debunk the bloop sound, because they refused to officially write it off, and they didn't have any kind of citations that they posted to go along with the letter to debunk it. Mm-hmm. And it's funny you mentioned that, because that's personally my favorite of the 4 episodes published so far. Mm-hmm. But I've also had the most feedback from that. Well, one particularly interesting note, I had a message come from Facebook from a man who said he worked with NOAA at the time, and I won't repeat his exact verbiage, but he said he always thought that their excuse was just a little bit off the cuff, but he doesn't believe anything that they said to debunk it. He thinks it still to this day was a live animal sound. Really? And when listening to the recording, I'd love to hear what you thought, but to me it totally sounds like a potential marine animal. Like, I don't know how the sound that I play in the podcast is supposedly the ice shelf cracking, which granted I've never heard any other examples of that, but I have heard examples of marine life underwater, and it definitely sounded more like the latter because of the tones.
Right. Well, it didn't quite sound, I mean, I have no idea. I'm not an expert. I don't know what the ice shelf, collapsing sounds like, but
exactly
that level of decibel, I wouldn't think would come from something like that,
No, that it was insanely loud. Like I mentioned in the podcast, it was 3 times louder than the blue whale, which is supposedly the largest or the loudest mammal known to man. So to come from something, or to come at such a great level of decibel, it would have to be an animal just tremendously large. And I cannot see the ice shelf being able to crack and hit those decibels, and just the wide fluctuating range of tones that the bloop sound made. It's just that's mind-boggling to me. I've been hooked on that one since I read about it, and especially that was even the flame was ignited even further when I got the Facebook message from the guy who said that he doesn't believe in OAA on their debunking.
Yeah. Boy, I'd love for you to connect me with him. I'd like to interview him.
that'd be I can totally do that. I can send you the link.
Well, yeah, or send him my information, and if he's willing to, I'd love to chat with him. That'd be great.
Yeah, that would be cool.
Yeah,
I'd love to hear it, because I never, like I said, I messaged him back on Facebook and said, man, I'm thinking along the same lines, but I definitely didn't have the research and the experience that you had at the time. I mean, he was in it firsthand, so.
Right. Well, it definitely sounded, I did rewind that clip a couple times and listen to it. It sounded like it was too, I don't want to say like machine-like, but I think if it was an ice shelf cracking, you would hear all sorts of variations in sound. And this seemed very like intentionally the same, like it went up and down a little bit, but it was not like chaotic,
No, it definitely. I totally feel what you're saying, and it sounded biotic. Like it sounded like an animal trying to communicate to me, just kind of as you described. Like the lack of chaos. I don't know how to describe the sound. I've still been puzzled on that one. I'm trying to tell your friends about it. It's like, well, good luck there. But
yeah. It's funny. I don't know if you've ever listened to Into the Fray radio.
Mm-hmm. I like that one.
Yeah, they recently had a guest on there, or I don't know if it was a guest. I think it was, Sam had brought the story about, these tunnels underneath LA where, there's big doors and radio frequency where actual submarines travel under the land into Nevada. It reminded me of that. Like, why would you need to, have sound travel 3,000 miles?
Yeah, that's another one of those questions that it's like I say in my podcast, what do you believe? It makes no sense, some of this stuff. So it's really just kind of a judgment call, like looking for the logical explanation behind it.
Yeah. Well, in the most recent episode about the Pukwudgie, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly.
That's what I was saying, and I was saying Pukwudgie, so we're gonna go with that. I'm not a Wampanoag Indian, so
yeah.
If they want to write me and correct me, then they probably can get a hold of me. But
well, speaking,
we'll
what's that?
Oh, sorry, I said we can go with Pukwudgie because, as far as you and I know, that's correct.
Yeah, I'm just saying it like it's spelled. I'm taking a big guess here. But hopefully, if anyone out there listening hears this and wants to correct me, please feel free. But you mentioned your ties in that episode to Native American ancestry, and I'm actually really closely related. I'm more than half Native American, being of Creek and Seminole descent. Yeah, so I thought you were talking about some of my local, like Florida, Alabama, Oklahoma area type of descendants, Do you have any more plans on visiting any more Native American folklore?
I do. I have a couple good ones planned out, and I'm looking for the second Journey into Native American Folklore to be coming out, and my second episode in November. I don't have, just on the top of my head, I don't have a date on that one yet, but it's one of my favorite cryptid creatures, and it's also one of my, in my personal opinion, one of the most scary. Well, here, I'll save that one as a surprise.
Oh, you're going to leave us hanging.
I'm relentless, but that one's an episode that I'm super duper excited about. I do have some other Native American folklore I've thought about sharing, but I don't know. The Wendigo is a very interesting one to me as well. So I would look for a Wendigo at some point.
Yeah, that's an excellent one. It's always funny, you hear like little things all the time. Like I know that some of the tribal ancestry I have, they see the crow itself as a bad omen. I've heard a lot of people say, if you look a crow in the eye and it does not fly away, that means death is upon you. And I've heard of a number of variations of things like that. It's just like, gosh, where does that come from? Where do they get it?
For real. There's so much. I think the Native American culture in particular is just loaded with so many great stories of folklore that it's very hard to have a Cryptid Creatures podcast, quote unquote, without exploring the Native American culture to a very, very good extent. And every time I get into it, I enjoy it a little bit more. Their stories are so elaborate and so detailed, and I love how they all have the origin story and their background, where some of the creatures that I've written about so far are kind of, I don't want to say like surface level or one-dimensional, but these Native American ones, even if there is what seems like no way on God's green earth to me that they exist, at least they've taken their own personality and they have their own heartbeat in the Native American culture.
Right. Well, if you had to pick, one or two, cryptid creatures that you thought had the most probability of something actually being concrete, realism to the story, which ones would you pick?
Oh man, that is an excellent question. Let me think about that. I know the Opagwudgie would be the first one I would say is definitely not real from the ones I've explored so far. This will make me sound halfway ridiculous, but I can totally embrace it. I totally believe wholeheartedly in Sasquatch, and I believe I've seen him before. And in Oklahoma, that's a big thing, but I do have my own firsthand Sasquatch sighting I'm the guy with a Bigfoot Oklahoma bumper sticker on my car, and I have a 3-foot tall Sasquatch ceramic statue on my front porch after my sighting with him. And I totally think that's another one of the things that got me into this interest into cryptid creatures, because before that time I never considered any of those things possible. But the more I think about it, is dense of woodlands as I live around totally seems possible for a fairly large ape to live in the woods.
I love it.
You okay? Good. Well, at least if I sound totally crazy, at least I have your approval.
No. I mean, it's totally plausible. I think that we're finding new species all the time.
Exactly, and some of them, the ones that are ape-like, to me, sound a whole lot more plausible than 7-foot tall goats that walk on their hind feet, or some of those. One of my new favorite episode, which happens to be episode 5, coming out in 2 days. So I hope you all can check that out. But it's another one that I will not say is likely, but I do make the claim that it's possible. I'm doing the Lizard Man of Scape Ore Swamp. And the story, I just love the script. And the story's super duper engaging with this boy who in 1982, I believe, was traveling home from work and his car breaks down and he has to pull over to change his tire. And according to him, he gets ambushed by a 7-foot tall lizard that slithers out of the swamp, rears up on its hind legs, and chases him.
Oh, wow.
But as incredibly unbelievable as that sounds, we have the Komodo dragon that can grow up to be almost 12 foot long. And we have over 50 species of lizards worldwide that can commute like with bipedal locomotion, where they can rear up on their hind legs and run. So in theory, if there was a lizard of similar size to the Komodo dragon that could move with bipedal locomotion, then this whole idea of the lizard man of Skateboard Swamp could be at least scientifically possible. It might not be likely by any means, but if we had an enormous lizard that can, when it gets to running fast, can rear up on its hind legs, then there's definitely room for it to be possible. And I definitely tend to shade on the skeptical side of all these stories, but if they have what seems like some degree of possibility to me, I really am more inclined to be interested and intrigued by those stories.
Well, they say a skeptic is just someone who hasn't had an experience yet.
There you go. Perfect. That's how I was, I think, totally before my supposed Sasquatch sighting. The bloop is another one that I think could totally be a thing. Mm-hmm. Whether or not it was even heard, like even if the sound recording really was ice cracking, if we've only explored 5% of the ocean, literally there is no telling what else is out there.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, they're always, looking and seeing what washes ashore after a tsunami, and, weird stuff comes out of the ocean.
Yeah. You have no way of telling when the ocean is dark. And like I said in the podcast, the sunlit layer is only, what I say, about 5% as the ocean's depth in most places, when I don't remember the exact number, but it was something along the lines of 27 of the Empire State Building stacked on top of each other. Yeah, would be as deep as the ocean. And that's just insane.
Yeah, and we can't really go that far down in it.
Exactly. There's just no way for us to ever be able to explore that far and know what all the biotic life down there is like.
Well, I think my fans would kill me if I didn't go back and ask you more about your Sasquatch encounter.
Okay, well, that's understandable. I totally appreciate the interest. I was headed home from church, and this was my sophomore year of high school, so 4 years ago, and it was dark. It was about 8 o'clock. Sun was kind of beginning to set. When I say dark, kind of sunset time. Mm-hmm. We're getting there, and just in my headlights, I saw this just giant pair of eyes and a shadowy figure. The eyes were some good, I'd say 6.5 to 7 foot off the ground. And at first, by the time I saw this thing and it ducked kind of back into the thicket, it's like, what on earth did I just see? Like, mm-hmm. It takes a minute to process, I guess. But by the time it hit me, I was like, holy cow, I got to stop the car and go look, like all logical high school students should do, chase into the woods after a prospective large, enormous, potentially dangerous ape. So I stopped the car, got out, and of course didn't find anything of interest. But I looked for footprints, indentions, broken branches, anything that could give any kind of indication that I had seen something out of the ordinary. But I struck out across the board there, so...
Well, I love that you went into investigation mode right away.
Oh, well, I was there was about 3 seconds of, I can't talk. It's reasonably late, so I'm halfway tired. There was 3 or 4 minutes of just, what on earth did I just see, just kind of sat in the car, and then it's like, all right, we're checking it out. I don't care if people think I'm crazy. I'm going to go look and see if that was a deadgum Sasquatch. So wow. I went exploring and didn't find anything, but since that day, I've always been very intrigued by the Sasquatch myth, and that's kind of one I'm saving up for a special episode of Cryptid Creatures. So,
did you ever tell anybody about that?
I did. It kind of became a popular story among our high school, so to say. For those of you guys who don't know me or haven't seen pictures of me, I'm fairly tall. I'm 6'5", but I also wear a size 17 or size 18 shoe. Mm-hmm. So the joke is that I was the local Sasquatch after I had told the story of my sighting, and they're like, "Oh, you just stumbled upon a mirror or something of that effect." So it definitely was not believed by many, but it became a kind of a fun, pleasant, teasing kind of thing that we had going on. around town for quite some time.
You gotta love high school humor, right?
Oh yes, no doubt. And some of these high school jokes, they're relentless, let me tell you.
But you weren't really interested in this kind of thing before that?
That was, I mean, at the time I'd been watching Destination Truth and all those good shows, and it's not like I by no means am trying to suggest that I like had Bigfoot on the mind or anything. Bigfoot was definitely one that I never really considered even too terribly interesting. But that's really kind of what inspired me, at least my fascination with Sasquatch. For the longest time, before I had ever started researching the other creatures, Bigfoot was the one that was hogging the majority of my attention. And I did a whole lot. I'm pretty well read on Sasquatch, believe it or not. At the time, I checked out 6 or 7 of the most reputable books that I could find and powered my way through them and took a surprising and almost embarrassing amount of notes from these books. But I have a binder just full of like Sasquatch notes, and the likelihood of it actually being some sort of thing to me is astounding. Like, the more I read, the more convinced I was. And I read a couple books that started with a foreword that came from the author who said something along the lines of, before writing the book, I was a skeptic. Mm-hmm. But after all the research, I'm kind of leaning the other way. And there's so much research and all of that jazz that it really definitely seems like there's at least a mild to good possibility that there's an ape in the North American woodlands that we've not yet discovered. And you would think in an age of blooming technology, when essentially everyone has a high-resolution camera in their pocket on the cell phone age, that at some point we're going to have some better pictures start showing up. So I know, as crazy as this sounds, every time I drive home from school or wherever, when it's that kind of sunset time, now I have my camera, or my phone rather, in my car door, just ready to go, just in case I need to whip it out and take a picture. So definitely, I am, and I haven't admitted that on my podcast yet, but I am a hardcore believer in Sasquatch. But most of the stuff that I've researched and talked about, I'm not too certain of, and that's trying to put it nicely. But I'm really trying to stay fairly neutral in the argument and leave it up to the listeners to decide what they believe, whether the science or the myth outweighs the other.
Well, I think you'll like one of my upcoming episodes here. I got a chance to talk to Cliff Barrickman from Finding Bigfoot.
That's excellent.
Yeah, he's like a wealth of knowledge. He's a really nice guy and just so knowledgeable on not only the history, but you know, what's going on in the world right now to research these things. And, you know, it makes you wonder, like anything where it's like, you know, you're not quite sure if you're on the fence where, you know, fact versus fiction versus folklore, you know, I find myself leaning one way or another at different times in my life. But, yeah, I mean, you pick these topics and, you know, like you said, I don't know if I would necessarily believe in the puckwudgie, but, you know, like you have a whole country of people who believe in Icelandic elves, you know, and that's a modern society too. It's not like they're an indigenous, non-technologic people.
Yeah, I totally feel you. It really is mind-blowing how many people believe in Sasquatch and some of the creatures of that nature. And here's a couple of spoiler alerts. And October, to celebrate Halloween, I have 4 episodes coming out, one of which is about ghosts. And these were astounding numbers to me, but I read 42% of the American population believes in ghosts, 35% believe in UFOs, and 21 or 22% believe in Sasquatch. So, I mean, the ghost especially was just a mind-blowing number to me, that nearly half the American population believes in ghosts. But the Bigfoot, 1 in 5 people, and Sasquatch is not as big of a thing in some areas as it is, like in Oklahoma it's big, in Texas it's big, Florida, the New England area. It has its central spots that seem to be like Bigfoot hubs, so to speak. But I mean, shooting 20% across the nation seems like a really impressive number for something that there's never been any hard evidence of.
Well, it's interesting too. I haven't heard those statistics, but I don't know if you've had any paranormal, experiences that you would, label a ghost, but I know a lot more people who've had those than Sasquatch experiences.
Mm-hmm.
So, have you ever had any paranormal experiences?
I have never had anything remotely paranormal. So, and I'm not saying I love watching the ghost shows. I'm not saying I don't believe that it's possible by any means, but I just have never firsthand had any kind of crazy experience. I've had friends tell me some weird stuff, mm-hmm. but unfortunately, me personally, I've never got to experience something of that supernatural nature.
So you're you're an odd statistic because you haven't had any of those experiences yet. You have had a Sasquatch experience, and it's interesting. Like, I don't know what I'd rather have. I always wondered. I personally don't think I've had a Sasquatch experience, but I ran into something at night when I lived in North Carolina, and all I know is I guess I have to tell the shortened version of the story here, but we lived outside of Raleigh for a few years, and I went out for a jog one night. I was trying to get back in shape, and we kind of lived out, and I think it was a dirt road that just got paved. I mean, it kind of tells you where out you are. My neighbors were half a mile away, and I went down my driveway and started running along the road, and I mean, there's not much for street lights out. I had a little lamp on my head. I kind of wore like a headband,
Oh yeah, totally feel you there.
But I was running along. I didn't get more than a quarter mile away from my house, and I heard this like grunt, like ugh, like that. And I thought it was a bear because I stopped in my tracks and I looked over, and maybe 10 feet off the side of the road there was a thicket of trees, and I saw eyes, and they were about as tall as me. I'm 6 foot tall. So I was at eye level, maybe 30 feet away from something. And I was just thinking bear, but I don't know. I tried looking up to see if there was bears in the area, and really there weren't any. There's a few black bears that roam around like the mountainous areas of North Carolina, mm-hmm. but not outside Raleigh. But the thing was, I start, taking slow steps backwards, and I have no idea. The eyes only flashed for a moment, and they disappeared. And all of a sudden, I felt the ground like almost as if the thing jumped out of a tree or something and hit the ground. Whatever it was had weight, where I could feel it in my feet. And I was just thinking, holy crap, I don't know if this thing's running towards me or away from me. But I just kept walking slowly backwards until I didn't hear or see anything anymore, and went back in my house and like, screw this,
Yeah, that's a good indication that you should be done jogging for the day.
Right.
Whether it be a bear or a Bigfoot, I don't think I'd want to be out there. And from most of the stuff I've read, the Bigfoot, is it Bigfoot, Big Feet, Bigfoots? We'll go with Bigfoots. Bigfoots don't seem to be too terribly dangerous, but still, I would not want to mess with / provoke a enormous monkey. Like,
right.
Just in theory, it sounds like a terrible idea.
I talked to Cliff Berkman about the pronunciation because he was saying Bigfoots, and we got into a little tangent on that. And that is the accurate pronunciation. So kudos.
Okay, so it's Bigfoots?
Yes.
I love that there's like a defined, accurate pronunciation of that. That makes my heart really happy.
Oh man, yeah, I wouldn't label my experience as a Sasquatch though. I mean, I've been to camping in Yosemite. Bears are all over that place, and it almost sounded like a bear. I was just shocked because I couldn't, I didn't find any sort of evidence of mm-hmm. bears around in the area. I asked my neighbors the following week, and there's like, no, we've never seen a bear around here. So I don't know. Just what do you chalk it up to? Unexplained.
Yeah, and it totally is. Either way, it's a cool story. I love that. I love the open-ended stories where you don't know for sure, but if you did know for sure and it was a Sasquatch, that would kind of be changing humanity as we know it. So
right. So you did say you're going to have some more like ghost stories coming up as well?
I do. For October, I'm taking a little paranormal adventure. Like I said, Lizard Man of Scape Swamp is coming up as my next episode on Saturday. But then after that, I have a ghost episode. And then on the night before Halloween, I have a very special bonus episode that is kind of TBA. But what I can tell you is it's about what I think is arguably the scariest monster known to man, which would also be mankind, and the terrifying things that we have done to fellow men. So that one's one of the bonus episodes I have planned for Halloween, and it's about various murders and terrible crimes that have taken place on Halloween night. So I can't think of a better time to release something like that than Halloween Eve, so people trick-or-treating and roaming the streets will be checking over their shoulder for the crazies walking down the street. But that one was a lot of fun to write and research. It's insane how much terrible crime happens on Halloween. It's the leading night of murders in the United States. So just fun fact there. And then following that on Halloween Day, I have an interview coming up with a paranormal expert, but I don't want to give a name yet. So we'll save that one as a surprise at least.
Oh, are you going to do that on the podcast?
I am. It's going to be a bonus episode on Cryptid Creatures.
Nice.
So we'll see how that goes.
Well, that sounds great. Well, I've really been enjoying your show, and I will definitely tune in for episode 5 coming out soon.
I appreciate it.
Well, if you want to give us a little plug for your show, how people can get in touch with you, where to find you online, feel free.
Appreciate that, Jeremy. All right, guys. I have a website at www.jessehaynesauthor.com. There's no I's in Jesse or Haynes. So if you want to check me out there, you can link up to all my good stuff. Facebook, Twitter. Holy cow, that was an enormous enormous clap of thunder we had in the background. Don't know if you picked that up or not.
I did. I didn't know what that was.
Excellent. Well, the house is still standing, so we're in good shape there. But anyways, JesseHaynesAuthor.com. I've published 2 science fiction novels, Creepers and Creepers 2. Creepers is on Amazon for 99 cents all of this month in observance of Halloween. So, and of course, my podcast is Cryptid Creatures, which is a look at animals that may or may not be real and the myth and the science behind them. So I just kind of try to leave it open-ended and let my listeners decide what they believe.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. And I'll always put those in my show notes on my website. So another huge shout out to Jesse Haynes. Thank you so much for appearing on Deviatus. We will definitely have to keep in touch in the future. I will definitely also be following your work, and I have a feeling this isn't the last we've heard of Mr. Haynes and his cryptid creatures. You can find the show notes for this episode at deviatus.com/cryptid. And guys, before I go, I just want to quickly tell you, it takes a lot of time and energy to produce these podcasts, to actually record and do all the post-production and everything that goes into podcasting. And even though it does require a lot of effort, I do really appreciate podcasts that I listen to, as well as being able to provide you with one that you don't have to pay for. So I am certainly not asking for your money, but I would appreciate if you could go to my social media and, do a share or a like of any of the episodes that you've put out that you've maybe connected with and enjoyed. You can go to deviatus.com to find all my episodes. You can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at deviatuspod. Or you can go to the Facebook page. All of these links are at deviatus.com. So thank you for listening. For those of you that have been sending in your comments and who have been interacting, I do really appreciate the feedback. I do this for fun, but what really makes it even more enjoyable is the feedback that you provide. So thank you. And until next time, make sure to enter for the Ted Berner Proof the Novel giveaway, and have a great October.